Representative Chris Rabb is the sponsor of legislation that would update the unfair trade practices and consumer protection law to prevent what is known colloquially as greenwashing. So, Representative, what is greenwashing?
Greenwashing is precisely that. It's when companies distort, manipulate, deceive, or omit information to make it appear that their products or services are environmentally friendly. So that's the green in greenwashing. So it is a manipulative ploy to confer a sense of confidence in consumers that they are buying something that is green when in fact it is not.
Can you give us an example of something, you don't have to name names, but of a way that a company would do this?
A very common kind of claim is when folks say this is a net zero product or operation, or somehow because of the green protocols or operations of a business, any emissions or negative outcomes are addressed by cleaner processes. So when people say, oh, net zero, okay, so that means that they are correcting or otherwise addressing any environmental harm the company is responsible for, when in fact it's not true. And that's essentially, we already have a statute on the books that addresses this. And this extends that to include greenwashing, because there was a time when if you were a tobacco company and you're selling cigarettes, you'd have commercials in print and on TV that said cigarettes are actually good for you. I mean, it's hard to imagine any corporation saying that now, but that's why we have laws. There were the sugar industry did the same thing, saying sugar is actually good for your kids. We don't do that anymore. If we did do that, people would lose their minds because we know that's patently false. The science has proven that for generations. There's no dispute that these things are bad for you if you consume them at a certain rate. The same applies to the operations, products, and services of corporations that are having a deleterious impact on our environment. This is an existential threat. So it seems appropriate that this statute would be updated to address something that is not only perilous to the earth we live on, but is one of the biggest considerations for younger consumers who are making many choices in their lives about what they're going to do and what they're going to consume and how they're going to behave, because they don't know if they've inherited an earth that will sustain human life.
What are the dangers of something like this if you don't update the legislation?
Well, it allows corporations to promote falsehoods and deceptions that create profit for them, to therefore encourage them to do it more and not actually change how they run their businesses, how they produce their products, provide services that will have an impact on everyone else, not just the consumers of those products. And so if we are validating a business's business model and their product line because of false information, that makes it very hard to pivot towards environmental resilience in light of what's coming. And we currently are amid a climate crisis. So if some of the largest corporations in the world that sell billions of dollars worth of products, and they're being affirmed by consumers who are unsuspecting of their falsehoods, it has significant impacts beyond just those consumers and those corporations, because that also influences whole industries, which means that the minor players will get on board in a direction that only benefits the shareholders of those corporations.
Is there anything on a federal level that monitors or regulates this?
Yes, the Federal
And where does your
Trade
bill
Commission
come into play?
Sure. The Federal Trade Commission addresses this through what are called green guides that provide guidelines for corporations for what is appropriate in terms of how they represent themselves to consumers, which is a start, but it is more of a floor than a ceiling. So just like the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25, states can have higher minimum wages. And every state around Pennsylvania, for instance, has a higher minimum wage than we do. So the feds set the floor under which you cannot go. This raises the bar for Pennsylvania corporations for the benefit of Pennsylvania consumers.
How do you keep them in check? Who's in charge of knowing when there's a violation? It seems like it would be something hard to actually enforce.
No, it's the beauty of it is quite easy. If you are a corporation, you have a website that lies about its products and someone doesn't like it, this bill, when enacted into law, gives them cause to sue that corporation. And it will allow the judge to say, you got to take down this website, or you have to change what you say in the marketing of a specific set of products. It may also, the judge could also be empowered to provide restitution to whole classes of consumers that have been unknowingly buying things that do the opposite of what they thought they were doing. And so there are examples of this. In Canada, a similar law was enacted, and a industry website that was promoting falsehoods shut down immediately because they would be exposed to civil litigation. And in the state of Minnesota, the state attorney has gone after two major corporations, and as a result, they've had to change their practices. And these things happen rather quickly. So because these marketing tactics are meant for the public, they're not hidden because that would defeat the purpose of marketing. So that's why such a statute would be so powerful, because anytime a consumer or any other entity or organization sees something that is clearly a lie or exaggeration or misleading and can back that up, they have grounds to sue. And presently, they don't have that in the state of Pennsylvania. And that protects everyone, not just the aggrieved consumers, but everyone in our Commonwealth of 13 million people.
So it would take some kind of litigation or legal action to enforce this.
Right, but the people who have standing do not have to be directly harmed. So if I were to buy a product and it was misleading, I could sue even though it did not personally hurt me. And so it's a much lower bar, which means that the impact of litigation is a lot more meaningful and a lot quicker. And any business that wants to avoid bad press and a lot of legal bills, it's just easier for them to stop lying. And as soon as they stop lying, that gives consumers less noise to work through and make more sound decisions about how they wish to consume or purchase products that otherwise would suggest that they're greener, or that the operations of a business or a whole industry are cleaner than they really are.
You mentioned Minnesota and Canada. Are there models that you followed in drawing up your legislation?
I created the model. So this is a first in the country, legislation on the state level. And I'm hoping that other states will follow suit in their respective legislatures. Pennsylvania boasts the largest full-time state legislature, but we are also the last remaining state to be divided. We have a House that has a Democratic majority and a Senate with a Republican majority. So things move pretty slowly currently in Pennsylvania in this legislative term. However, there are other states where they could have the political will and momentum to replicate this bill that I've introduced in their respective states.
What have you heard from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle?
I haven't, because this bill has not come up for a vote. This bill has not gotten a committee hearing. In fact, it just got referred to the Judiciary Committee. So this is not, and we're also not in session. So there would be no reason, for me to hear from my colleagues until I'm in Harrisburg, or until they're interviewed, excuse me, till they're interviewed by people like you.
Do you anticipate smooth sailing for this one?
I do not, because I work in Harrisburg. So no, I do not. I do not anticipate this being a a strongly bipartisan bill. If I can get a couple Republicans in committee to support this, because if this protects consumers, so it should be a bipartisan bill. But in the 18 months that I've served in the majority, I have found that very few things ultimately are sustainably bipartisan. In other words, I have found that a lot of my colleagues will vote for Democratic bills in committee and then get amnesia when it's time to vote for the very same bill on the House floor. And that's more politics than anything else. And I'm hoping that the politics of hyperpartisanship will be reduced after November, and moving into a new legislative term that begins December 1st.
So who would be subject to this? Is it companies based in Pennsylvania? Is it companies doing business in Pennsylvania? Is it companies advertising in Pennsylvania?
The latter two. So they don't have to be a Pennsylvania corporation, but it's based on, if you are a Pennsylvanian who can purchase products. Obviously, if it's a Pennsylvania-based corporation that has operations that are greenwashed, then they would be exposed as well. And it's not just, it's anything that relates to the environment. So this is not just regarding energy production. If someone says, oh, this form of energy or fuel is green, but it can apply to how environmentally sustainable the operations of a business is, or a specific product beyond an energy source. I mean, we live in a state that is the second largest producer of fracked gas. So, it could be something around that, but it doesn't have to be. It could be really anything that relates to the environment. And I think that's a really good point, because we can't remove how we address the climate crisis and environmental sustainability and resilience and stewardship with anything else we care about. If you're a homeowner and you're worried about the next storm, there was a tornado in Philly. There didn't used to be tornadoes in cities, certainly not on the East Coast. That's a new thing. That's related to the choices we make individually, but disproportionately through industry and commerce. So there are really few things that we care about that aren't related to how we address or ignore the climate crisis.
As a founding member of the PA Climate Caucus, what is on your agenda for the next session? Do you have some priorities other than the greenwashing bill?
Well, I can't speak for the Climate Caucus, as I'm not a member of leadership of that caucus. I'm a proud and active member. But, moving towards 100% renewable energy is important. There is no sustainable way that we can address the climate crisis and environmental remediation unless we get off of our addiction to fossil fuels. It's not going to happen overnight, but it has to happen if we want to have a Earth that will sustain humanity in the coming generations. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The scientific community internationally is in consensus around that. The people who have their heads in the sand are people who are influenced by lobbyists, or people who don't have the creativity to look beyond the type of things that sustain their local or regional economies. But there's opportunity to pivot, because as soon as a renewable energy company, for instance, comes into the backyard of someone who does not like wind and solar and is creating good family sustaining jobs, I imagine the politics of that representative or senator will incrementally change because everyone likes to take credit for good jobs coming into their backyard. And the momentum of good family sustaining jobs in Pennsylvania in the energy field are coming through solar and wind. They're not coming through coal. They're not coming through fracking. And these are not just temporary jobs. These are long-standing jobs. So eventually that fulcrum will be met, and I imagine it will significantly influence the direction of the politics of both parties when we see what is truly sustainable, both environmentally, economically, and politically.
Representative Chris Rabb, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.